Hello, g'day, how you going? I'm Mike Vaccaro. This is episode number 2 of Presence, Healing and Purpose, conversations that inspire positive change in your world. Hopefully, have a listen, find out. I'd like to take a moment before I go any further. I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where I live and work, which is Bundjalung Country. And I want to acknowledge the elders, the customs, and the right to the land that these beautiful Indigenous community members have. So for this episode, my guest is Brad Hodges, and we're going to be talking about the neurobiology of stress. I'll tell you a little bit about Brad, and then I'll unpack a bit what we're going to be talking about in our conversation today. So Brad is the director of Go Neuro, providing consultancy, training, and supervision based on the neuroscience of health, happiness, relationships, and performance. Brad says, Go Neuro will provide you with the knowledge to live a consciously informed life, feeling more in control of your future and enhance your existing strengths while empowering you towards your goals. Sounds pretty amazing. Since 2003, Brad has engaged in informal tertiary studies, professional and therapeutic roles. He holds an undergraduate bachelor degree in social science, majoring in behavioural science and counselling, and a graduate diploma in psychology, and is a level 4 member of the Australian Counselling Association. Brad is passionate about neuroscience and how these insights help us understand why we think, feel, and behave the way we do. Since 2015, Brad has expanded his experience into supervisory and clinical roles, supporting other practitioners and professionals with neuroscience insights into reflective practice, critical incident debriefing, cutting-edge holistic self-care approaches, and empowering therapeutic practices. Brad has delivered masterclasses and keynote speeches at conferences and believes knowledge empowers success, well-being, and happiness. I've known Brad for a little while now and done some work with him. He's an awesome educator, awesome speaker, a lovely guy, a gentleman. And today we're going to talk about brain anatomy, the stress response system, stress overload, and practical evidence-based tips based on neuroscience research that you can take away from listening to this conversation with you and implement in your life straight away. So I hope you find this as fascinating, helpful, and interesting as I did, and enjoy the show.
I suppose when I finished high school, I moved to Brisbane and went to university to study counselling, and first had the opportunity to start to learn about this industry in a volunteer counselling role with the Gay and Lesbian Welfare Association. Mm-hmm. So it was a really beautiful opportunity to get some insights and understanding about people were having in life while I was going through my formal tertiary studies. And then when I finished those studies, I moved into the child protection system, working within child safety in Queensland, and had so many opportunities to meet people that have experienced some of the biggest challenges that we can face in life. Mm-hmm. Experienced some of the greatest traumas and hurt and pain, and really had so many learnings just from connecting with people and empathizing with them and showing compassion and spending time to hear their stories. Mm-hmm. Through that journey, I came to realize that there were so many shortcomings and vulnerabilities in our child protection system. There were so many beautiful people that were working in that system as well, that came into the system with their heart in the right place. And yet through so many different challenges and struggles and burnout and compassion fatigue, there was so much of that system that I could really see limitations in. And so after about 6 years working in that statutory system, I transitioned over to be a private therapist. So working as a counsellor, and was able to work with a beautiful team of therapists at Complex Care, a private therapeutic company. And along that journey, offered individual counselling and therapeutic interventions to children, young people, their families, carers. And over the years, as I continued to develop my practice, moved into some more clinical roles, offering training and psychoeducation and behaviour support and supervision to other professionals in the field. And that was part of my journey where I had the beautiful opportunity to meet you, Mike. working with a range of services, both within Queensland and New South Wales, within child protection spaces, as well as in private sectors of counselling and therapy as well.
Did you see right back when you first started studying counselling, could you have imagined it unfolding in this way? Was this all part of the plan?
It was very much one step at a time in my journey. And looking back, I suppose over the last 15 plus years since I started studying, I can see that every few years, the knowledge that you gain and the skills that you develop and the insights that we learn completely change our approach, our framework, our skills, and what we do without those skills.
Yeah.
I suppose when I first started in the volunteering counselling role, I had no idea where my career would take me, and the amazing, beautiful people that I'd meet along that journey and be able to walk alongside in their path to healing and happiness.
It's interesting how we evolve as we're doing it. So the one that started the journey is the one in the middle or the end.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And there comes a point where you look back and kind of go, how did I get here? Yeah. And so when you first started counselling, did you have an interest in the neuroscience angle back then?
Not as much back then. I didn't understand too much about neuroscience back in the earlier stages. And I guess that's quite reflective of the trajectory that neuroscience has been on over the last couple of decades. As our technology has advanced and imaging techniques have advanced, we've learned so much more about how the brain works. I remember within the first few months in my professional career, I went to a training at the Royal Children's Hospital here in Brisbane, and the training itself was on neuroplasticity. And it seemed like this beautiful wave of hope that we were starting to learn that the brain was malleable. It was able to change and grow throughout the whole human lifespan. But back then, we didn't really understand exactly the intricacies of how it worked. And more importantly, what were the implications of that? What did that mean in terms of health and well-being and treatment planning and trauma recovery? And we didn't understand that we can actually influence that system through everyday lifestyle factors. And that's been a beautiful part of my journey, is gaining that passion for neuroscience and knowing that when we understand why we think, feel, and behave the way we do, it can be a real game changer in people's motivation and buy-in to do the things that are so important for us in life. Now that we've got all the science to back it up, it's just even more empowering.
So what would you say before you started being more influenced by the research around neuroscience? What would you say, where were you leaning more towards as a counsellor?
Yeah, for me, it's always been about relationships. It's always been about connecting with people and helping people to feel safe. Because given my experience within the child protection system, and I built these relationships with particularly teenagers and adolescents that really struggled to feel safe in relationships. They'd been rejected and abandoned by everyone in their life. And they felt so blamed and criticized and having expectations that were beyond what they felt capable of in those moments. And I just found these beautiful opportunities to just connect human to human with someone. To try to let go of the expectations and just to hear their story and to really try to feel what they were sharing and what they experienced. And I feel like that was a real foundation of my framework. And over time, I found that there was ways in which we were able to connect with these young people that saw better outcomes than what we were seeing more systemically and than what a lot of their experiences had been. We've seen a lot of our therapeutic industry have expectations sometimes, or hopes that our young people can walk into a physical office and adaptively express their struggles and their needs and be receptive to a lot of traditional frameworks of counselling and psychotherapy. And I guess I saw over the years that it really didn't work for so many people. particularly those that had experienced complex trauma and a lot of rejection through their life. So they really needed a creative way of engaging with the therapist, a way where the therapy and the learning, it didn't really feel like therapy. It just felt like two people hanging out in a safe way, but in a way that they were able to make sense of their world, learn why they think, feel, and behave the way they do, and develop some strategies to cope with big feelings and develop skills towards a better life.
So how much of what you do would you say is based around strategies, and how much is based around sort of that building that connection and that rapport? And is it even is it worth even quantifying that, or does it depend on the person?
Yeah, it's interesting because in our field, we often frame an intervention as we're in a rapport building phase initially. And I kind of feel like we're always in a phase of relational connection.
Yeah.
No matter how long we've been working with people. And I've had the beautiful opportunity of working with some young people for up to 8 years and seeing a journey from young primary ages all the way through to early adulthood.
Wow.
And there's different ebbs and flows and challenges that they experience. And I think that as humans, we want people to understand that we keep growing and evolving through life. So relational connection is absolutely key. It's something that we need to do every session, throughout a session, in every relationship. It's beyond the realm of just therapy. It's about connecting as human beings.
Yeah. I can't remember the exact quote, but there was something around where we break within relationship is best healed within relationship. So it's in building that relationship with the ones we're with that we can best heal those sort of fragmented parts of ourselves that may have been sort of fallen apart through relationship growing up in our family systems.
Definitely. And when we look at life, a lot of the challenges that people face all align with different core skills of life. They're skills that as human beings, we don't have ingrained from birth. We have to learn them through a sequence of repetitive interactions of as a little bub, and then as a toddler, and as a child, and then an adolescent, we cue our safe caregivers to our needs.
Yeah.
And what starts off as a bub with crying and being met with nurturing and soothing and comfort. And over time, we then learn those internal skills about co-regulation, evolving into self-regulation. But the challenge is if kids have not experienced that level of support through those early years, they haven't developed those core skills. It can become a bit trickier to practice and teach and engage with people in that way as they move into later years of adolescence.
Would you say that we're all kind of on a spectrum of how well that was provided for us, and that sort of carries through as adults for all of us to our ability to self-regulate and empathize and manage our own emotions and meet our own needs? Would you say we're all kind of on a spectrum of our ability to do that, and that relates to how well it was modeled for us as a baby or as a child?
Wrong, Mike. And I think it's important as part of that we look back with kindness and compassion and empathy as well, that our parents or caregivers did the best they could with the tools and knowledge and experiences that they'd have had.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been one of the beautiful learnings in my journey as a therapist over the years, and even working outside of the complex trauma and child protection space with people in society who parents just want a healthier connection with their kids. They're struggling to open up conversations about challenges that they're facing. And there's such amazing moments when you work with parents and you teach them the importance, absolutely, how vital it is to show vulnerability with your kids. And to be able to share a little bit about what it was them growing up with their parents and why they parent the way they do and the intention behind what they do.
Yeah.
And there's these magical moments between kids and their parents when we let down those walls and those kind of expectations of what parents should and shouldn't talk to their kids about. And when we attune and connect and give context, it can be a real game changer in relationships and open up new pathways to a much healthier way to be in life.
Mm. And I think like that wealth of information that sort of you're privileged to have access to when you work in that sector, through experience with young people, and also the types of trainings that you provide, it really, for me, it was also informing my understanding of myself and how I react and respond, and how that relates to my own upbringing. Getting a sort of a glimpse at what helps, say, look at attachment styles, for example. What type of upbringing would lead more to you having an anxious or avoidant attachment style, and what your threshold is in your own window of distress tolerance, like how much you can handle before you break, kind of thing. So have you found that for yourself, working in this industry, and even just from when you started studying counselling, that there's been a personal development journey happening alongside with it?
Yeah, definitely. We're all human at the end of the day. We all have the exact same brain systems. And depending on what our lived experiences have been, determine how strong the pathways in different parts of the brain are, how strong and accessible those skills are. But we know that we all face the same human experience, that when under stress, certain parts of the brain don't work optimally, and we can't access them in a stronger way, and in turn it impairs our functioning, and it results in some less than ideal interactions.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the power of neuroscience is when we understand what's going on inside, it gives us such a powerful pathway forward to navigate those turbulent times from an insightful perspective.
Yeah.
Lessen the intensity, quicken the repair and the learning, and it's a game changer in relationships, which we all need in modern society with the level of pressure and stress that relationships are under.
So maybe that's kind of a good opportunity for us to kind of go there and talk about the neuroscience a little bit more, and how it relates to, I guess, stress and managing stress. And so could you maybe tell me a little bit from your perspective and what you've learned around neuroscience? Tell me a bit about the brain and how the brain works.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose if we start with some of the different parts of the brain, we could break the brain down into 3 levels. We have our lower survival-driven brainstem. We have our midbrain, which is called our limbic system, and it's responsible for emotional and cognitive functions like memory and our safety survival responses as well. And then our upstairs smart brain, which is known as our cortex. In the cortex, we have our left and right hemispheres, which each have different functions and skills within them. And ideally, our brain works in a very integrated way between the left and right hemisphere, with communications flowing between, and vertically between the higher and lower parts of it.
Right. Okay, so what would the difference between the left and the right sides of the brain function be?
Yeah, great question. And I'll just preface some of these skills traits with, as we talk about the stress response system, we'll learn that the left hemisphere gets very reduced in functioning when we're under stress. So these skills I'm about to share are ones that we're not always going to be able to access in a stronger way. So our left hemisphere is our logical, rational, strategic part of our brain. It's the part of the brain that helps us communicate effectively with words and language. It remembers past context. What happened last time I was in this situation? And also prepares us for the future consequences of our actions. If I do this, what's likely to happen tomorrow? When we look at our right hemisphere, it's more of the in the present. It's our emotional, empathetic, creative part of the brain. And it's about our relationships with others.
Right.
And the right hemisphere really synthesizes information into the here and now with how we're experiencing it.
So I imagine, like most things, it's not sort of black and white, like when I'm talking to you, my sort of the right side of my brain is working and the rest is shut off, that there's activity happening all the time, right, around the whole brain. So when we talk about right and left brain function, how do we know that sort of these different sides relate to different things?
Yeah, it's been really interesting how our industry has learned over the last century or so about the functions in different parts of the brain. A lot of that, unfortunately, has been as a result of people experiencing traumatic brain injuries or blood clots or strokes in different regions of the brain, and then subsequently seeing the skills that have been impacted in those patients. There's been, as I touched on earlier, with the development in imaging techniques through fMRIs, we can now see in real life time feedback of how a brain is working. So when people are participating in different actions, recalling memories, using different skills, we can see what parts of the brain light up.
Yeah, right.
Just how integrated and connected our brain is.
So it's through observing, mainly what we've learned is through observing people that have sort of undergone trauma, and using neuroimaging. Is that right?
Yeah, MRIs.
MRIs. Okay, cool. And so what about in relation to stress and how we experience stress and the brain?
Yeah, it's been so interesting learning more about what stress looks like in our brain. The best way to describe that is there's a domino effect. When any of our five senses, thoughts, perceive a potential threat or stressor, there's a sequence of different organs in the brain that are activated and come to life. That process itself typically starts off with our thalamus, a region in the limbic system, coming to life. And it sends a signal through to our amygdala. Our amygdala, it's what starts off that stress response system. And in the therapeutic world, we give that a name called the HPA axis, which simply describes the different organs that are about to be switched on and activated to provide safety responses.
Okay, the HBA axis.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that sometimes, if like with certain levels of stress response, that sometimes that stress reaction can stimulate a physical reaction before you even register in your conscious mind that the stressor is there. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. All of these processes happen so quickly that it's automatic.
Right.
So from any of our five senses or our thoughts detecting a stressor, to our thalamus coming to life, communicating with our amygdala, which is like the smoke alarm in the brain. Then it starts the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland, and then signaling all the way down to our adrenal glands, which are just above our kidneys. And in turn, our adrenal glands are going to release two key chemicals, adrenaline and secondarily cortisol, each having different impacts on the body and brain.
So I think both of these are getting press, and it's likely that a bunch of people have heard of adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline's probably been more publicly been aware of, like the term adrenaline junkie, for example. So what about cortisol? What's going on with cortisol?
It's interesting that you use the term adrenaline junkie, because the more I come to understand about these different chemicals, neurotransmitters, growth hormones, stress hormones, the more that it's sounding like it's actually a cortisol
Right.
that we're all having in modern society.
Cortisol
and
junkies.
High stress jobs. Exactly. So it's a little bit of a flip on the old terminology. So I suppose to describe cortisol, it's better if I start describing adrenaline, because adrenaline is what actually pumps our body up to protect us. Its goal is to help us fight off a threat or flee from a threat. Mm-hmm. So our heart starts racing faster when adrenaline's pumping through our system, which in turn increases the blood flow through our body, our muscles, and to our brain. Our lungs expand, so we get extra oxygen. We also, the liver, releasing additional glucose for energy. So all of our internal resources are guided towards self-preservation and survival in those moments. And what's interesting is we're learning that the blood flow and electrical activity in the left hemisphere and frontal lobe regions of our brain, our cortex, are actually drained when the stress response system is activated.
Right.
And so when we take a look at cortisol, its job is that it's released a little bit more slowly than adrenaline, and it aims at numbing our experience of pain, to helping us cope as best we need to in those survival moments. But it also puts the brakes on that stress response system, slows our heart back down, reduces lung capacity to normal, stops the liver producing extra glucose, and it restores function to our upstairs brain in the left hemisphere and frontal lobe regions.
So you could think of that like, because when I talk about sort of the fight, flight, freeze response, I think that I say to people that our body, sort of like the parasympathetic nervous system, is interested in homeostasis, like keeping a balance within your system. But then when you go into the stress response, into the sympathetic response, that's not the number one priority anymore. And so would you say that, so let's just say I become stressed out because there's a threat or a perceived threat, and my nervous system starts to go into the sympathetic nervous system and sort of lets homeostasis go out the window. I'm not going to have a nap or have a meal. I'm going to kind of fight or run away. And then cortisol is kind of like saying, can we please come back to homeostasis? Is that how you kind of...
You could describe it like adrenaline is like the accelerator.
Yeah.
Like the brake.
Yeah, right. Okay, I didn't know that.
Slow down that human that's response to stress that we have.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And both of these things, obviously, our life depends on them. We have to have the ability to do both, and yet, we can kind of, or maybe I have been susceptible to almost demonizing stress or adrenaline or cortisol sometimes, and kind of warn people off being too stressed out. But it's probably helpful to have this understanding that you're talking about. This is like, we wouldn't still be here as a species. I wouldn't be alive right now without this ability to regulate myself through adrenaline and cortisol. So they're really our friend. But so when is it a problem and when is it helpful?
Yeah, great question. So you're right. Our ancient self-preservation stress response system in our brain, it's designed to keep us safe. It is part of our evolutionary survival mechanism, and it's how we as a species have gotten to where we are today. The challenge is in modern society, this system is triggered in a way that our evolution hasn't been able to catch up with. And I'm just wondering, Mike, would it be helpful to show a video of what this system looks like, what the stress response involves, and the different organs that communicate to help understand that process?
Yep, absolutely. I think that'd be really helpful. So what are we going to see here?
So I'll talk you through this video, and it will just show the process I described before about how our five senses or our thoughts detect a potential threat, and then the system of different organs and chemicals that are activated and released to communicate with each other, and then what happens when adrenaline is released and cortisol. But I'll talk you through that with the video to describe in a bit more detail.
So just to kind of put it in layman's terms, if I was to go to walk across the road and all of a sudden I realized there was a car right there coming at me, you're about to describe what might be going on inside of me in that moment when I realize that I'm about to get hit by a car.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's important to through a video and imagery, because it is a very complex process.
Yeah.
And yet when we see this in action, it helps break it down so it's more understandable and makes more sense.
I know myself over the years, even after hearing it again and again, like HPA axis, and hypothalamus and cortisol and adrenaline, I sometimes get a bit jumbled up with it all as well. So it'd be great to see what you got here visually.
Okay, can you see that video?
I can.
Beautiful. So when any of our five senses first detect a stress or potential threat, our thalamus comes to life, signaling our amygdala, in turn activating our hypothalamus. And our pituitary gland then communicates down to our adrenal glands. And they're firstly going to release adrenaline, which will increase our heart rate, expand our lungs, pump extra blood through our muscles and to our brain, and our left hemisphere blood flow is reduced. And then cortisol is released from the adrenal glands, numbing pain and returning our digestion, heart rate and lungs and cognitive function to normal.
Right. So it's really good to see that sort of laid out in that way, because it gives you that sense of sort of the way that it, even though I'm sure it happens like in a split second, like the way that this information travels through the body down and back up again. And it also sort of highlights this sort of, you hear the term mind-body or mind-body spirit or mind-body medicine, and this connection between the brain and the body. But really, we're seeing in a diagram like that, that there's no separation here. And of course there isn't, because the head is just a part of the body. So it's really all the body in a way. But seeing it sort of laid out in that diagram, the way you just showed it, sort of illustrates the way that it flows through the body really, really clearly. And so I'm just thinking, you mentioned in there that one of the things that happens is that your lungs expand. So I'm guessing that's in relation to the fight, flight, or freeze response, or the fight or flight response. Lungs are expanding because with more oxygen, you have more energy, you'd be able to run further or whatever's needed in the moment.
Definitely, definitely.
And do we have an idea of how quickly all that does happen?
Yeah, it happens within a split second.
Right.
If you're in a situation, think of a time you might have gone for a walk or a jog in your neighborhood and you instantly hear this ferocious bark of a dog behind a fence, and the way at times our body can just jump. It's an instantaneous response. There's no time to process the information and think everything's okay. It's just that adorable little chihuahua behind the fence. I'm completely safe. In that moment, we have an instant embodied response.
So that makes a lot of sense. And I guess like the point I made before around the reactions happening before we can even think about it, if that dog wasn't on a leash or behind a fence, and we may need to protect ourselves before we can figure out what's going on, that's why it's short-circuiting our frontal cortex. Is that right? Is it going straight to action rather than sitting there and pondering about the situation?
It's a much slower process for our smart brain to make sense of the situation and decide what course of action is most appropriate in a situation. That's why we have these really important survival parts of our brain. As much as a lot of elements of modern society can overactivate them and they can compromise our relationships, our well-being, our functioning, we actually need them. So there's some different strategies that we're developing over time as to how we make peace with and friends with those systems, so we can use them when we need them, but also learn how to tame and calm them when they're not so adaptive or healthy for us.
Yeah, right. So this is, I guess, where it becomes practical. So what happens, first of all, before we go into how this sort of could be useful, practical, maybe we could look a little bit about what happens in the body when we spend too much time stressed out or we become too stressed out. Because what I hear a lot from people is, oh, how stressed I am, or burnt out even. And I'm sort of thinking, you know, what is this? It's like a stress epidemic or something. What's going on here with stress?
Such an important question. So we know that the production of cortisol is not always excreted by the body. It's not always all utilized. Because in modern society, this stress response system is so often activated in situations where we don't require any physical exertion to fight or flee our way out of a situation.
Right.
And the difficulty is with excess cortisol production, without it being burnt up, it remains residually in the body. And we know that excess residual cortisol is toxic. It's neurotoxic for our brain. It erodes away many organs in the brain, many of the key parts of the brain that help us with memory, emotional regulation, mood control, healing, problem solving. Physically, the structures of the brain begin to shrivel and become smaller in size and less able to do their job. And
sorry, go on.
I was going to share that it's interesting, a seesaw balance where the healthy parts of the brain are compromised and the amygdala, that smoke alarm in the brain, the stress response, is actually strengthened. So with prolonged exposure to stress and excess residual cortisol in our system, researchers found that our amygdala can grow by up to 70% of a healthy size. So our amygdala is physically growing, which makes it overactive and less accurate, becoming stressed at times where there's no physical danger presenting. And the difficulty is then, as we saw before, the side effects, the reduced upstairs brain function, all of the physiological changes that occur. And we're now learning that that system is activated by something like running late for work, being stuck in traffic, scrolling on social media due to the sensory overload.
Wow.
In typing a message to a friend on Messenger and seeing the ... or seeing that they've read, but they haven't replied yet. There's so many aspects of modern life that have become neurotoxic. With parts of the brain that are compromised, it's all the way down to our chromosomes. On the end of each of our chromosomes are protective caps known as telomeres. And telomeres, we want them to be long and strong. They're our life force, our human, the biomarker of how long we're going to live. And with excess residual cortisol in our system, our telomeres are physically shriveling. So it becomes so vital in modern society about how we learn about things like the cortisol levels, about how we maintain a healthy lifestyle, how we tame our amygdala and make peace with it and friends with it, and work on our lifestyle to enjoy the benefits of technological advancements, but not let them control us subconsciously.
It's really fascinating what you're saying, Brad. So when I hear the word neuroplasticity, and maybe it's just the way it was marketed when they first started, the brain that changes itself and like these types of books that started coming out, I think, oh, wow, that's great. I can, develop this version of myself that's really, superhuman. But what you're saying is that, neuroplasticity isn't something that we do to get a good result. It's something that's happening all the time. And if we have a stressful lifestyle, that neuroplasticity is working against our health and against our well-being. And we're actually growing the capacity to be unhappy by practicing unhappiness on a daily basis with stress and lack of self-care and things like this. So neurotoxicity is damaging. So the actual symptoms that you would associate with, say, burnout, for example, the tiredness, the brain fog. And it's funny because you could ask almost anyone how they're going and they might say they're good, but most people will have some version of this, right? I feel tired. I'm not concentrating as well. I'm finding it hard to sleep. So this is actually, you're saying this is sort of potentially from an excess of cortisol as a neurotoxin that hasn't been flushed out of the body and it's in there, and it's actually affecting the connections of the neurons in your brain and reducing our capacity for happiness, productivity.
Yeah, right.
Right. So, okay, well, what do we do?
That's
This doesn't sound like a happy story right now.
it's a really important question. And if we look at the culture of our society right now, where we as a society over the last 2 years in this global health pandemic of COVID-19 have experienced such stress and worry. And I would very comfortably hypothesize that globally as a society, our amygdalas have grown over the last 2 years.
Wow.
There's been more stress activation. There's been greater residual cortisol, and it's had a significant impact. There's so many aspects of isolation, lockdowns that have affected our mental health, our connection with people, our physical activity, our work productivity and performance, and what work has looked like. Our lives have become a lot more sedentary, well and truly before the pandemic.
Yeah. Let alone after.
Yeah, a lot of modern society, we move our body a lot less than we should, unless it's in a purposeful way. And there's many features of modern society, like we're so connected with this technological world that we have, yet really truly present. And we see that every day in the way that we have impulses and urges, and we're stimulated to check our devices, to check out, even when we're spending time with people we love and care about. And there's so many social events where people are spending time on their device, not with each other. And that's the kind of thing that we need to become really savvy with. If we're not aware, we're going to fall victim subconsciously to this.
So what's going on there, Brad? If I'm sitting there and I'm at a cafe with my friend and I have this overwhelming yet probably unconscious subtle urge to pick up my phone, why is that all of a sudden more important to me than catching up with my mate across the table?
Yeah, it feels so much more important in the moment because of the different neurochemicals that are released. So when we engage in things that are sensory stimulating and activate our innate reward and motivation system, our dopamine system, it's going to be really enticing. It's going to be difficult to avoid the temptation and to manage those impulses and urges to access those things. So the amount of dopamine, the neurotransmitter of reward and motivation that we receive, varies depending on the activity. And unfortunately, the dopamine production of a social interaction with a loved one or a friend is less than what we get through a lot of our devices, given the level of stimulation, connection opportunities, the sense of worth and value that that we've had instilled in us with a lot of social media engagement, and the way that a lot of our minds have been programmed over the last few decades.
So dopamine's a motivator, right? So the last 200 odd thousand years, dopamine's there encouraging us to sort of connect with the strong, healthy people in our community, to go and find food, to do the things that are life affirming for me and my tribe, basically. And dopamine would have been released in like a more I guess a balanced way. Yeah, like a sustainable way. I guess the way that we'd evolved to have it be used, and now we're getting sort of these regular sort of craving for easy access dopamine through looking at a screen, responding to messages, and so you're saying that has become more motivating than things like social connection. And is that because, do you think that's because there's a lot of our basic needs are already met? We have a shelter, we have food, and so it's like, well, what's motivating me? And then now we have this sort of like pokey machine like device in our pocket that's kind of saying, feel good, feel good, feel good.
Exactly, beautifully said. And it's more so than just dopamine circuitry as well. When we're in that moment of engaging with that device and scrolling and the level of sensory stimulation, our HPA axis is activated as well. Because our mind and our parasympathetic nervous system strain of rest and restore and calmness is most functioning and optimized when we're focusing our attention on one thing at a time.
Right.
And yet when we're scrolling, whether it be through social media, news feeds, YouTube, we're looking on a streaming service for what show we're going to watch tonight, and we're flooded with decision paralysis.
Yeah.
There's so much overload and choice that it activates our stress response system. And in turn, the cortisol production is addictive. So what's so interesting is cortisol has very similar properties, chemical properties, to the illicit substance opiates, the calming effect that cortisol has on the brain and body. And so subconsciously, we keep recreating circumstances and behaviors in our habits to produce cortisol. So without this conscious knowledge, without these learnings and integrating cortisol cleansing, dopamine detoxing or restricting periods, and being aware of this and taking control of technology and enjoying the benefits, but not having them control us subconsciously, we're likely to continue following these cycles. And it's so vital for our younger generation about how these kids that have grown up in this world where they knows this experience. I feel so fortunate to have grown up to a certain degree into my late adolescence before the internet age.
Yeah.
But so many of those things that we look back on now is just the easy life, a more basic way of living, and time where you connect, when you play, when you get outside, and still enjoying the benefits of technology and the wave of growth that we had. But for little brains that have lived experience and in utero experience and in turn epigenetic coding of this modern world, it's a very different experience. And they need a lot more psychoeducation and knowledge and understanding so that they can be in control of their life and thrive, just get swept up by all of these different neurotransmitters.
Do you think that, I mean, it's really obvious when you talk about sort of opiate addiction, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, and it's easy to kind of point and say that's what that is. Do you think that we, the world today gets that we're in a situation of addiction with technology in this way?
I feel there's many voices out there. There's many amazing people that are sharing this knowledge and strategies in their own way. I've had beautiful opportunities to learn from so many specialists and wisdom sharers throughout recent years, and I've gone on a really passionate journey of professional development and literature review to really understand what the research is telling us. Because I know that anything we say, it has to be grounded in evidence.
Yeah.
If we don't have the research, the evidence behind what we're saying and the neuroscience to back it up, it's a lot less likely that people are going to take what we're saying on board.
Right. It's the gold standard that people seek to have confidence that it's worthwhile, because there's that much out there as well. I guess it's another almost a sick representation of some of what's happening in society, is that part of the problem that's happening is, like we said, the addiction to the dopamine and the cortisol with the screen time. And yet you have to, in order to find solutions, that's how you find them. You find them through your screen. And then you go onto your computer, or you go onto your phone, or you ask someone else who's done the same thing. And there's a million different options for what, everyone's going to have a different piece of advice on what's going to help, what's actually going to work for you. So you don't want to waste your time doing this, that, and the other if it doesn't have, the result that you're putting your precious time in for. So I guess by using evidence-based materials and evidence-based interventions for this stuff, at least we have a sort of more confidence that we're going to get what we're looking for.
Exactly. And I think that was part of that journey when I did About 3 years ago, I did it for 2 years. I focused most of my energy and time on a literature review to really understand how the field of neuroscience has developed. And it was grounded in, I found these pillars of my framework in therapeutic intervention were on implementing exercise, quality nutrition, restorative sleep, and calm focused attention. And they seem to be these repeating themes of treatment planning and strategies. And I wanted to really understand the neuroscience of that. And through that literature review, I was able to find 270 journal articles as current as 2021 that I felt were relevant enough to include in training programs that I feel can revolutionize the field of self-care and well-being. And it's so beautiful to see the knowledge that we're learning and the intricacies of how we're understanding the stages of the sleep cycle, exactly how we empower those processes, how different nutrient compounds can actually cleanse cortisol from our system. As little as having a lovely cup of green tea a day, cleanse cortisol from your system and promote healthy cognitive function. So
green tea is the answer.
One of many answers. But just, I think the why is what's so powerful, because we can tell people what to do. As we've always heard, exercise is good for you.
Sure.
We've sometimes heard in advertising, hey, it's good for your heart. But when we know the intricacy, that in 20 to 40 minutes of vigorous exercise where we get our heart rate up to the point we're sweating, you're flooding your brain with healthy dopamine, with healthy experiences of another growth hormone called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
Brain-derived neurotropic factor.
It's just like fertilizer for the brain. Floods the brain with this chemical that means we produce more dopamine over time in a healthy, adaptive way. So you're more motivated, you're more driven, you're more likely to do that report you've been putting off, or you'll perform better when you're sitting for that exam or studying.
So can I just bring that back just for 1 second? I just want to understand this. So this is from the research review that you've done. Some of it suggests that when I exercise between 20 and 40 minutes, and are we talking like, what kind of exercise can we do here?
We describe it as vigorous. So vigorous walking. So anything that's going to get your heart rate up. So the point that you're sweating.
Okay. And
if you're sweating and you've held the sweat for about 20 minutes, you know you've hit that powerful zone to really increase the production of that cocktail of healthy neurotransmitters.
Okay. Brain-derived neurotropic factor. Is that right?
Yeah.
BDNF. And so we do this exercise, we're sweating, heart rate's up for around 20 minutes, and we start to actually create this stuff from scratch. Is that what you're saying?
It's a cocktail of chemicals.
Yeah.
And each chemical has really powerful benefits for the brain and body.
Right. Okay. And that's one of them, the BDNF. Yeah. Okay. And then how often, because you hear you got to exercise 3 times a week. Some people say you should be exercising every day. What's going to be a useful amount of exercise for this?
Anything is better than nothing.
Okay.
Best practice is every day.
Yeah.
Get your heart rate up for 20 to 40 minutes, around 30 minutes every day, and you're going to be optimizing your health and well-being. And there's so many intricacies to this. What's so current right now in this global health pandemic is that we know that exercise and the increased heart rate, the increased blood flow through our body and muscles actually empowers our immune system.
Right.
Our immune system, when we're sedentary, becomes sedentary and lazy itself.
Right.
Optimizing its functioning through movement, which has been so motivating for me on those days where I haven't felt like going for a run. With what I'm facing right now, I want my immune system to be like the elite secret service, ready to protect my mind and body the best that it can. It makes it so much easier to go for that jog or a walk or a ride or do some weights, whatever it is that puts a smile on your face and makes you move your body.
I remember I didn't finish it, but I did part of a health science degree, and I remember learning about how the lymphatic system is running along sort of side of the vascular system, but without the pump. So when we need to move our body for this lymph fluid, this immune system to be functioning. It doesn't have the heart there pumping it through like with the blood. So that movement is actually helping to move your immune response, so to speak, through the body and help excrete what needs to be gotten rid of. And another thing that caught my attention from what you said was, we often think like there's this common term, brain food, right? But you're saying that exercise is actually feeding the brain.
Yeah, definitely. Exercise is an ingredient. It's a part of that puzzle. But as with everything, it's one part of a bigger picture.
Right. So, and before we move on from exercise, I just want to make sure we've covered the basis here, because it sounds like there's three things if we go back to what you said about cortisol. So you're saying that one, you're producing BDNF, which is going to help your brain sort of grow and learn. It's also boosting your immune system, and it's also helping excrete the cortisol from your body, which, as you said before, if it builds up, it's creating neurotoxicity.
It's creating one more really important chemical that actually builds stress resilience. When our heart starts beating in an increased way through exercise in a safe and controlled way, we're releasing a particular molecule called ANP, atrial natriuretic peptide. And it's a natural stress protector. It builds stress resilience.
Right.
So stress and cortisol is less neurotoxic, the more ANP in our body.
That's amazing. So this is reaffirming this idea of the mind-body system being the one system as well, isn't it? And
yeah,
you can maybe supplement your therapy with a gym membership, or even just going for a walk, taking your dog for a walk, because that can be enough, can't it? Just a half-hour walk around the block.
I think that's an important part of therapeutic interventions, and when we're supporting people, is giving them some things that they can do outside of that session. I remember when I was in primary school on learning music, and my piano teacher told me that only 10% of the progress we make will be attributed to our sessions together. 90% is what you do in between each session.
Wow.
And I think that was her beautiful attempt to motivate me to practice as much as she could. But it's so true. As a therapist, I've learned that the time I spend with people is really powerful and important and healing and motivating. But if that's for a few hours every week, there's so much more time outside of that where the mind's not focused on those goals and practicing those skills, those neural pathways that we're creating that are very fragile in those sessions, and that are new pathways are potentially going to not survive, not be the way they could.
So if I've had an upbringing or an experience in my life that's traumatic, and this has probably made me more prone to experiencing stress in my day-to-day life, which would therefore make me more prone to neurotoxicity, more prone to excess cortisol, brain fog, memory problems. And I'm sure anyone that's listening to this that's had traumatic experience in their life, whether it's acute or persistent, could attest to the fact that it's not something that was just a bad day. It's something that actually affects the way that you think and relate. So this is super important when thinking about people that are recovering from trauma as well. Hey.
Exactly. This is part of a holistic process. Part of counselling and psychotherapy will help people make sense of and process an overwhelming experience, and give them tools as to how to make peace with and friends with their amygdala at those moments, at those flashbacks and those overwhelming body recollections and experiences that present. But also there's so many things that we can do in our lifestyle that we now know what all those lifestyle factors do is it increases our rate of neurogenesis. And what that means is the amount of new brain cells we create every day. We create a baseline of about 700 every day, but with all of our lifestyle factors between exercise, nutrition, sleep, calm, focused attention, and additional life enrichment factors, We now actually know by research that we can empower that by up to 500%.
Wow,
That's
500%.
700, yeah, into about 3,500 a day.
That's a big difference.
Massive difference.
I mean, when you do have brain fog and lack of clarity and some unresolved experiences from your past, there can be this overwhelming sense of like, well, this is just it. My life is just hard now. And, and maybe even there might be thoughts of, and it's my fault because it doesn't matter what I do. It's, I don't want to get out of bed, or it's hard to remember things. So what you're saying is that it's possible to change, and it's a holistic approach. And you've mentioned already the benefits of exercise in this recipe, and green tea, by the way. What else? Can we unpack some of the other things whilst we got you here that are helpful in that holistic journey?
Definitely. Quality restorative sleep is probably one of the most underrated parts of our lifestyle. We sleep for about a third of our life. So to dedicate that portion of our existence to one function, it has to be absolutely vital. What I found so interesting was learning that our brain is actually more active while we're asleep than when we're awake. When we look at brain waves while we're in different stages of the sleep cycle, they're more powerful and more active. And what we know in the field of neuroscience is we understand exactly what's happening in different stages of that sleep cycle. So if we're not achieving deep quality restorative sleep, our brain and the little microglial cells that go through our entire brain while we're in deep sleep, like a tsunami, flooding the brain and picking up all the neurotoxins and gunk. If we're not getting deep quality sleep and empowering that process, they're actually not cleaning out neurotoxins. And we now know that the buildup of those plaques, neurotoxins, one in particular called beta amyloid, results in what we know as Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
So every day has a cumulative effect to what our quality and longevity of life is going to be.
So what were those cells called? Microglial?
Yeah.
They kind of sound happy. Microglial.
I think of them like the cute little cells that go through our brain and clean out the toxins, like the gardeners of the brain.
the garden fairies that go and spread their magic through the night.
So we need them to do those housekeeping functions.
Yeah.
But we consolidate all of our memory, we retain things. And what's so interesting is very recent neuroscience is understanding now that we don't just consolidate memories. While we're sleeping, our brain is making sense of what we've experienced. We're problem solving, we're looking for patterns and associations.
Right.
And we can learn subconsciously in our sleep in ways that we couldn't learn and put together when we were consciously awake.
So what hinders these microglial cells coming in and doing that work, and what helps?
Stress, number one hazard to well-being globally. In terms of sleep, one of the biggest challenges we face is caffeine. It's utilization of caffeine in our life, be it through coffee, tea, energy drink.
Brad, please don't tell people to stop drinking coffee. They're just going to switch this off as soon as you start saying that.
Good news. It's all about timing. Enjoy that coffee, love that coffee.
Yeah.
But we know that caffeine stays in our system for about 8 hours.
Yeah.
So my advice that I give to people, 1 p.m. cutoff time for caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enjoy your coffee, your teas, your cola drinks in the morning.
Yeah.
But hold off on the caffeinated drinks from the afternoon onwards.
Yeah.
Because even though you might fall asleep under caffeine, and I'm often told by people how easily they sleep after a coffee at night, believe you 100%. But I guarantee you, you're not achieving deep quality restorative sleep.
So, because our brain goes into 3 different depth phases of REM, is that right?
So when we're awake, the first stage of the sleep cycle goes to where we're falling asleep, so sleep onset. And then we move to a deeper stage of sleep, and then down to the deepest stage of sleep, which is known as non-REM 3,
Non-REM 3.
wave, or delta sleep.
Right.
Then after a period of delta sleep is when we move back up into a REM phase. REM is close to wake.
Okay.
At the start of the night, we only have a little bit of REM, but as you go through the night, you get a lot of REM, up to an hour, between 7 and 8 hours of sleep.
So with caffeine running through your body, you might not be getting to that third stage.
You'll have much more light sleep and less deepest slow wave non-REM sleep, non-REM 3 restorative sleep.
Well, that's unfair because then you wake up feeling more tired and you want a coffee when you get up in the morning.
The cycle continues.
You'll be happy to hear, Brad, I'm on a 1 coffee a week habit, 8 a.m. on a Friday morning.
Yeah. Well done. Has that been a growth over time? Have you?
I went cold turkey, but it's just so around me, and that smell, it's just like, do I have to deprive myself from the experience totally? And what I found is no. And because I don't have that experience of daily use, or even twice a day back when I was working in the out-of-home care industry, that Friday is a super fun day because I haven't sort of numbed myself down from the effects, because that does happen with caffeine as well, is you build up, what's the word? Say again?
Tolerance.
Tolerance. Yeah, you build up a tolerance to it. So, it's like I'm actually getting the best out of my coffee once a week. Whereas if I was having it twice a day, I wouldn't, I would just feel normal the whole week.
And there's a few systems at play there. When we think about dopamine and the reward circuitry and motivational circuitry, when you have something often, you get less dopamine from doing that action. If you have a favorite meal and you make it night after night after night after night, it'll feel absolutely amazing and taste great the first night. It'll feel awesome the next night. It'll feel great the next night. And then it starts to feel like, I'm really sick of this. And whereas if you have things sporadically, the amount of dopamine you get from the freshness of that experience is increased. But the key in life is balance.
Yeah,
enjoy your coffee, enjoy your rest days. When we talk about getting quality restorative sleep, what we aim for is, I call them neuro nights, nights that are empowering our brain systems in our body. Aim for more than less in the week. So 4 nights a week, neuro nights. And then other nights, stay up a bit later, have a drink if you want to, do the things that you enjoy in life.
Right.
Aim for a few more of the good ones than the not so good ones. And that's how we have balance. We enjoy our journey and we have a long, healthy life and give us the best chance of achieving them.
I suppose, like you said before, that things like green tea, which is also going to help you boost your concentration and dopamine and things like that. You could alternate, and then that way, when you have the coffee might feel a bit more potent, but then you're not having it every day. You're interchanging it with green tea, maybe something like that.
Yeah. We all need to find what we feel comfortable with and be kind to ourselves that we're going to struggle with change, because the pathways in our brain that have been associated with habits are really ingrained, and we want to keep doing the things that we often do. So anytime we create a new pathway or try something new, it taps into the neuroscience of how we turn goals into habits. If we do something on a daily basis for about 4 weeks, that pathway associated with that new goal is much stronger, much more easily accessible, and it's a lot easier to do the new habit.
Yeah, right. So what else helps with sleep? We know that coffee is not helping, caffeine. What's going to help us?
One of the greatest things is about light exposure.
Yeah.
We have special cells in the back of our eye, and their job is to identify light. They're called photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. And what that like pre-technological advancements was that they detected the day and night cycle with the sun and the moon. And that gave our brain and body the signaling of time to rest and time to be awake. And that in turn signals domino effect different chemicals. The key one we might have heard of is melatonin.
Right.
Melatonin helps with sleep onset as well as a range of other really important functions in the body and healthy systems. And if we have light exposure, whenever those cells are detecting light, they're pausing that system of activating melatonin.
Mm-hmm.
And so practical strategy-wise, we want, from a good couple of hours before we're planning to sleep, we want lights to be dimmed.
Right.
We want to a lot of the bright lights. We want to turn down the backlight and brightness on our TV. We want to turn down the brightness on our devices. Use candles if possible. Different things that have lower light stimulation in your environment. And you might find when you try that for the first time, as your eyes are adjusting, it looks so dark and so different. And after doing it for a few days, you can see just fine. And it becomes.
I've been practicing that one for years now, and I'm always amazed at how sort of off-putting full light is to have all the lights on in the house at nighttime. I'm always like, can we just not do that? So we've covered some things that, you know, we've covered exercise and we've covered sleep. And is there anything else that would be really important that could be useful for people to help from a neuroscience perspective?
Yeah, I could talk for a long time about this one, Mike. There's different functions of exercise, nutrition, sleep, mindfulness, and even not so much to be formal mindfulness practices, even just having periods of calm, focused attention.
Right.
And then again, we have life enrichment factors is a category that includes things like having fun in life, laughing, socializing, connecting with other people, lifelong learning. There's so many variables in those different domains that promote health and well-being, help achieve that 3,500 approximate new neurons every night compared to the lower amount, and also all have functions of cleansing cortisol from our system.
Right.
If I was to give one more strategy today, there was beautiful research by Amy Cuddy about the power of body posture and its ability to cleanse cortisol. So we now know, as you were touching on earlier, Mike, that the brain and body are so interconnected. Our brain maps feeling states with how we hold our body. When we're feeling flat, low, tired, worried, overwhelmed, we generally hold a low power body posture. We're more hunched over, closed up. When we change our body to a strong power pose, chest out, shoulders back, chin up, feet planted into the ground, it activates different parts of our body and brain. And we've learned through research now that strong body posture, being held for a period of 2 minutes, can cleanse up to 25% of cortisol levels, which is a powerful tool that will easily fit into different times of the day.
Wow, that's 2 minutes. So just holding, so you call it a power posture? Is that right?
Power pose. So with kids, we get a bit playful and we talk about superhero poses.
Right.
We'll ask who their favorite superhero is and how we stand with our hands on our hips, our chest out, our chest planted into the ground strong. And during that time, holding that strong power pose and slow breathing empowers that process as well further.
In just 2 minutes. So that's enough to do between meetings, before you hop out of the car, when you get to work. And that's actually helping to cleanse the cortisol out of our system.
So if we're looking at after every day of work basis, at the end of a week to wind down for a weekend, before going on leave for a holiday, we want to be mindful of how we cleanse cortisol and stress hormone out of our system to optimize our balance. Because yes, work is a really important part of our world, and it brings so much purpose and meaning in how we give back to society and help leave this in a better place than when we came into it. But we also want to enjoy our journey. We want to be present for our relationships. We want to have all these other parts to who we are and how we experience our journey in life. And so cleansing cortisol is a really important part of how we allow ourselves to thrive and be present.
I could see that being really helpful for parents as well, being a parent myself, because, you know, sometimes 2 minutes is it. That's all you get when you're a parent. And you know, to have that 2 minutes and know how to put it to good use, because it would be so easy, because I'm guilty as charged to just go to the phone or want to check out and do something that's going to give you that dopamine hit, but it's not actually adaptive. It's not actually leading to me sort of expanding my capacity to cope, to be more resilient and learn. Whereas to just sit there, hold my Superman posture, do some deep breathing for just 2 minutes, it's so achievable and would be so much more sort of beneficial over time to have that as a daily practice.
Notice that pull, like you'll notice that pull towards when you've just wrapped up the day of work. I want to flop on the couch. I want to chuck on some streaming service. I want to also at the same time scroll on my phone. It's okay to feel those impulses and urges and cravings. This knowledge, we can choose to add in just a little extra step. Just a few things. We just want to tweak a few parts of our lifestyle to make the most of this journey and be as healthy and happy as we can.
And it's breaking that habit, right? So there's when you do something again and again and again, you're making that neural pathway really strong. And so not only do you have the feelings come up where you want to do those things, but you're so used to doing it every day, it's almost like you don't have a choice, like you've been plugged into a program and you're just going to play out that story the same way you do every night. So to actually stop and sit and breathe for 2 minutes would be a way to sort of break that neural pathway, that habit that we just feel compelled to do.
Whatever you focus attention on is what's going to grow. We're learning in neuroscience now as well that the pathways in the brain that we focus attention on are protected from being culled through synaptic pruning. So the more we focus attention on something healthy aligned with a goal, the stronger those pathways become and the more protected they are. And the things that we focus less time and energy on are more likely to be pruned and not be a prominent part of our mind and how we think, feel, and behave.
Incredible. This has been a very enlightening conversation, Brad. I think we should probably wrap it up, but I was thinking, could you just say a little bit about your offerings, what you do, how people can get in touch? Because I know that you've just put together a really amazing program, an educational program online that people can do to learn all about this using that research review that you had done. Do you want to maybe speak a little bit about that and anything else that you might have as an offering?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Mike. So after spending that time doing that literature review and with the knowledge that I was able to obtain, I wanted to put that into a program that was accessible for people. So as part of that journey, I developed a company named Go Neuro, and it's all about knowledge-empowered success. When we know why we think, feel, and behave the way we do, we have so much more opportunity to do something about it and create healthy habits and lifestyles and relationships we deserve. So as part of my website, goneuro.com.au, I have an online training program called the Neuroscience of Health, Happiness, Relationships, and Performance. It was really hard to come up with that title because just so many parts of our lifestyle are benefited from this knowledge. It's a program that's accessible online. There's quizzes to help with learnings, resources to download, and I narrate and take people through the journey of understanding how the stress response works in the brain and body, how to empower neurogenesis and hit that 3,500 mark, and how to work towards creating the healthiest cognitive reserve to preventing or treating Alzheimer's disease while having the best quality relationships and work performance that we can in life. So it's been beautiful over the last couple of years being able to share that program at a number of conferences with different organisations and staff and many members of society that have reached out. I also offer private counselling, clinical and supervision services through that business. So if anyone's interested, please feel free to have a look on the website and reach out.
That's amazing. So what I'll do is I'll put links to that stuff underneath the YouTube video and also underneath the podcast on Podbean. It was really amazing to reconnect, Brad, and have you share your wisdom and knowledge and experience. And I think that so much of the work you're doing is really, really necessary today. And it's just also such an interesting and fascinating angle to be coming from with the neuroscience perspective. So I really appreciate you coming on and having this conversation and sharing your time with me.
Thank you, Mike. Lovely to chat and share the knowledge.
Awesome. We'll talk soon. All right. So that's the show for today. I hope you really enjoyed that. I thoroughly enjoyed connecting with Brad and getting some deeper insights into some of the stuff that he shared with me and taught me over the years, that I can sort of personally vouch for, has inspired and helped me facilitate services to some of my clients. It's just been so transformative and helpful for people. So I hope you had the same experience. I just wanted to say thank you for listening to this month's episode of Presence, Healing and Purpose. If you enjoyed it, please like, share and subscribe. All of these, over this way, all of these little platforms over here. You can find me in different ways on there, where I'll be sharing free resources, podcasts, videos, blogs that are going to help you on your journey towards understanding yourself and finding happiness in your life. So today's podcast is also one of 4 offerings within the monthly value, an email sharing resources on psychoeducation, self-care and self-mastery. So I have a mailing list. I send it out once a month. No sales, just content that hopefully adds value to your life. If you're interested in that, go to the descriptions below. You're going to find a little link to subscribe. Feel free to do that or not do that. It's up to you if you want that value. So I really appreciate you taking the time to listen and tune in today, and I hope to hear from you again soon. If you want to ask any questions or sort of comment and add in your point of view, your knowledge to the conversation, feel free to do that in the comments below. And if you want to sort of spark more conversation on a particular topic, or if you have a question that you'd like me to cover in one of my videos, podcasts, or blogs, just go ahead and either email me at mike@vaccaro.com.au, or even just write it in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get back to you and respond to that comment. So thanks once again, and have a great day.